All right, this is the Troop 70 Philmont crew leader, wilderness guia, chaplain, youth leadership discussion. This is a mini audio blog put together by Charles Cochran and
JD Cochran.
Michael Cochran.
So I'll start just by giving a little bit of background, and then I'll have each person tell a little bit about what they did. So my experience with Philmont is that I did my Wood Badge mini trek there, and then I took 2 treks, one as the crew advisor and one as the assistant crew advisor. I also went to Northern Tier once as a crew advisor, and to Florida Sea Base. JD, tell us about your experience and your roles and what you did.
So I've been to Philmont 3 times and Florida Sea Base once. Philmont, I was the chaplain once, my first time, and then the crew leader the next 2 times. And then I was also the crew leader when we went to Sea Base.
I went to Philmont 1 time. I was the chaplain. I went to Northern Tier 1 time. I was the chaplain there as well. And then at Sea Base, I was the crew leader.
All right. So first of all, the from an adult perspective, I think that the youth leadership is really, really important. So this is not like a Troop 70 camp out where, you know, everybody's cooking and everybody's doing things. It's really critical that the youth work together. So, and they have to have leadership. So things have to be planned out. Things have to be executed well, because there's a lot less room for error on something like Philmont, because you've got to be in places, you've got to get things done, you've got to move quickly. There's duty rosters that need to be filled out, and the youth are really driving that. So the adults are there for safety. The adults are there to support, but really the youth have to drive this, because they are the ones that are taking care of, most of the core stuff. So it's really important that the leadership is established well, and that it's executed well. So I think the first thing we'll talk about is probably the most critical position is the crew leader. So I'll have JD talk a little bit about his experience as a crew leader at Philmont, and then Mike can add some things on as well.
Yeah, so I'll let Michael take more of like the chaplain discussion. But as far as being the crew leader, it's kind of the binding like position of an entire crew. Like Dad said, like the advisors are kind of just there to make sure that nobody gets hurt. But other than that, like the crew leader is kind of in charge of everything. There's obviously like picking the schedule, which you do as a crew, but like prior to actually getting to Philmont, like you do also pick the leadership positions, and the final like trek, whichever one you pick, is actually like up to the crew leader, like in the end. Obviously up to the crew, but like the crew leader has the final say. And then when you actually get there, there's definitely some responsibilities that you have to just have as the crew leader, one of which is called the crew leader copy, which is just a sheet of paper that essentially has your schedule, where you're supposed to be when, and that's like really important, because if you lose that or something happens to that sheet of paper, you can no longer get any food at like checkpoints. Like it's really important that you keep that safe. And then as well as the crew leader copy, the crew leader is in charge of like what you do at camp each night, like a roster sort of, where let's say this night these 2 people do the bear bags, and these 2 people will cook, and these 2 people will do trash, and you just have to find out a way, like a fair way, that everybody does every job but not like too much, not too little. Like you have to find a certain balance within the crew, and I would say that's another important aspect of the crew leader. And the third thing that I'll talk about is just kind of like keeping everybody accountable and keeping everybody's like spirits up, because Philmont can get really hard, especially halfway through. At the very end, everybody's kind of homesick, everybody wants to make it back to base camp, but it's really important just to like keep morale high, and like the chaplain definitely helps with that too, but ultimately again it's up to the crew leader. So those are probably the three things that I would say are the most important as far as being the crew leader at Philmont.
So is it fair to say that the duty roster, unlike kind of a patrol camp out where there's going to be some people that aren't doing things, I mean, for every meal and for every break camp, for every setup, people are going to be doing things. Everybody's going to be working. They're just going to be doing different jobs. Is that fair?
Yes. It's somebody is always doing something, and that's why I said it's like you have to kind of find a balance, because you don't want the same 2 people or 3 people to be doing the same job every single night. So it's kind of hard to find a balance where you like switch that around, and then if these people end up having to do trash like more than other people, like sometimes it'll just work out that way, but you have to try and make it as fair as possible.
Is it fair to say that some people might like jobs better than others, and so you're constantly trying to come up with the most efficient schedule as well? You know, maybe some people like things, but they're, you know, maybe some people don't like things, but they're really good at it, so they get assigned to it maybe an extra time here and there.
I mean, yeah, that could definitely happen. And if somebody were to come up and ask me, hey, can I help with this tonight, and there was availability for that, like, I'm not going to tell them they can't help, especially if they want to, because if they want to help, that's just another hand helping.
Let's talk a little bit about the rotating leadership position, which is navigator. Tell us a little bit about that role. I know that, you know, the 3 elected positions will be the same throughout, but I mean, kind of like the duty roster where you're assigning things, talk about navigator. That's a critical role too, isn't it?
Yeah, so navigator is also on the duty roster, and instead of switching off maybe once every 2 days, I tried to switch it off like every single day, and it like maybe at the very end it would hit someone that got it at the very beginning, but I tried to have at least everybody do that, or tried to have everybody do that at least once, just because it's an important skill, like in scouting, and like if you ever get lost in the woods, like somehow in your in real life. But the navigator isn't as much of like a leader position that has like a ton of responsibility per se, as far as like making sure the crew like functions, but as far as getting the crew where it needs to be that day, that's like all the navigators. So there's definitely some responsibility in that. And the navigator, like, normally our navigator would work with our crew advisors, the adults, just to make sure that they were like on track, and like even if the adults knew that we weren't going the right way or weren't on track, they would normally let the navigator take the lead, just because it's a good way of learning to make mistakes and then correct them. So
how many mistakes how many extra miles do you think you walked due to navigational errors?
I mean,
it sounds like it was at least a few times.
I mean, it happened a couple times, but it wasn't anything crazy. We maybe walked like 3 extra miles
in total,
like each trip.
So that's not bad.
Yeah.
Not too bad.
No.
So Mike, your experience as a crew leader was at Northern Tier, but do you have anything to add to the crew leader? What's it like, or sorry, not Northern Tier, Sea Base.
Yeah.
So what's it like, being a crew leader at a different high adventure, or just being a member, you know?
Well, at Sea Base, that one was less about actual roles, I'd say. that, at least when we went, we had a crew that was pretty much all older guys. We were all probably juniors in high school at that point. So we all understood the whole...
A little easier to manage.
It was easier to manage. Like, I didn't really have to fight with anyone to split up duties. But it really wasn't that big of a deal because there just weren't as many things to do. Like, we definitely had to send in some people to clean, like, the kitchen tables a couple times, but people just
So
said,
still keeping people organized,
right.
assigning
So I would
tasks,
say
a duty roster.
right. I'd say, hey, you two, can you guys help with the kitchen today? And they'd say sure, because at that point we all kind of understood what needed to get done.
So let's talk a little bit about the chaplain. So you were the
Okay.
chaplain twice, right?
Yes.
So let's talk about that, keeping morale. I mean, what do you feel like the main chaplain duties are? What makes a successful chaplain?
I'd say the main thing that the chaplain does is just keep the morale of the group up, and keep it spiritual, because it can get long and arduous when you're just like, depending on whichever trek you're doing. If you're just canoeing for 8 hours a day, or you're just walking with a backpack for 8 hours a day, it can get tedious, and you need something to keep it fun. Like, you need to think of something to do. So you can play a game, you can sing. I remember at Philmont we used to sing when we were hiking just because it gave us something to do. And another main thing that the chaplain does is have like a daily devotional, which we did this thing called Thorns, Buds, and Roses, which basically is your thorn is the worst thing that happened on that day. Your rose was your favorite thing that happened on that day, and your bud is something that you're looking forward to tomorrow. So...
Well, good. Did you have any? So it sounds like when things got tedious, you guys sang and did things. Any other examples of things that you did, or any issues that you had to deal with?
I mean, sometimes we would play card games, and that could be fun. But it was also, we were all just very stressed, and so there were times when even that got too competitive, or it just we kind of tore apart a little bit as a group. And the chaplain is, along with the crew leader, probably those two are going to be the main ones that try to bring the group back together, because when you're on a 10-day trek, 12-day trek with the same people and you're doing the same hard stuff, like, it's not easy. People are going to get mad or annoyed.
How does it go? How does the dynamic of the team work from the beginning of the track to the end of the track to the middle of the track? I mean,
Right.
Talk through kind of the progression and what you may have seen. And JD, add some color onto this as well.
All right, so this is what I've seen. At the beginning of the trek, everyone gets there and they're super excited to start. And you're just like sitting in base camp waiting to begin. And so the first 2 or 3 days, everyone is like on top of what they're supposed to do, and they're excited to do it because they're still excited to be there. Then once you get to about like day 4, 5 maybe, and then throughout like day 10, I'd say, you realize, or you don't realize because it's not true. You just think to yourself like, oh, this sucks. I don't want to be here anymore. So you're less willing to do your assigned job. You're less willing to just like be a happy camper per se. Just like you don't want to be there, and so you show it outwardly. You are rude to other people, and so at some point you just kind of get like frustrated with the whole situation.
So that happens to everybody at some point.
That
on the
happens
track,
to
is what you're
everyone
saying.
for sure. That
Everybody definitely has like a breaking point.
yeah.
Not that it's like a, oh, this sucks, I don't want to be here anymore, but like being out there and being in the wilderness for 12 days with the same guys and doing strenuous physical activity, it gets hard. Like, and so everybody just has a breaking point and they'll deal with it like a different way. But it's not easy.
I mean, it's a tough experience,
It's
right?
a tough experience, but like once you get to the end, it's also like very rewarding. It's a very rewarding experience, and you're like, wow, I just hiked however many, like 70 to 120 miles in beautiful, like, New Mexico in the Rockies, and you're like, wow, that was amazing. I'll never forget about any of this. But, like, while you're doing it, there is definitely a point where you're like, this is really hard. It's not like this sucks, I don't want to be here, but you definitely hit that point where you're like, wow, this is really difficult and challenging, and I don't really know how to deal with it. But it's definitely still, like, a great experience. And, like, yeah, morale definitely dips, like, in the middle, and it probably boosts back up at the end just because you know you're so close. But, like, the best crews are able to keep, like, a high morale the whole time, which my third time I feel like we were able to accomplish pretty well.
So let's talk a little bit about the wilderness Gia. I realize you guys, neither one of you were in that job, but obviously you know the role and you know what it's about in terms of teaching of the outdoor code and running the sessions similar to Thorns, Buds, and Roses. We ran the outdoor code sessions and the Leave No Trace sessions every night. So talk a little bit about the wilderness Gia and what he was doing to help make sure that we stayed on hardened surfaces and did all of those things that the outdoor code showed us.
Yeah, so not being a wilderness Gia, I would say, like, the main thing looking in was, like, they wanted to make sure that Philmont was maintained for, like, the next people. Like, one of the things that's amazing about, like, the entire ranch is that they keep it and have kept it so nice for such a long time, so that anybody after us can, like, go and experience it and have the exact same experience, and the people 70 years ago would be looking at the exact same thing as people who go now. Like, I would say that the main job of the wilderness Gia is just keeping everybody accountable as far as, like, maintaining the natural beauty of Philmont.
Following procedures,
exactly,
that type of thing.
Yeah.
And the same can be said for Northern Tier. I know JD didn't go on Northern Tier, but it's the exact same principle. It's a gorgeous area to just be in. Like, obviously you're in the moment and you don't really appreciate it because you're frustrated. You're doing really hard physical activity and you don't want to be there at some points, but, like, you still have to remind yourself that the wilderness there has looked the exact same for many years, and many scouts have done the exact same thing that you've done for many years. So it's important to keep the area nice for the next group of scouts that will be there. Like, if the next person that camps where you're camping can tell that you camped there, you have done a bad job of leaving no trace, obviously. That's the entire goal of Leave No Trace, is to make sure that no one knows that you were ever there. And especially on these high adventure treks, it is so important to leave no trace, because no one's gonna come in and pick up your trash for you. And if you leave it there, you're probably gonna damage the ecosystem, and that'll ruin it for scouts to come. So the Wilderness Gia having those sessions at the end of every day is really important, and they should be listened to. All
right, let's finish with one quick story and what you think you most gained from your high adventure experience? JD, why don't you go first?
Alrighty, let me think of a good story. So, I would say, like, this isn't really like a teachable story. This is just kind of one of my favorite moments of Philmont. But there was a camp called Abreu, and I remember, like, it was pretty late in our trek, I think, and one of the things that this camp was famous for, was kind of known for, was their, like, on-tap root beer. And so, at the kind of very end of our trek, we were all tired. We all wanted to get back to base camp, get back to civilization. But we sat down at the bar, drank a mug of root beer, and then we were ready to go for the rest of the time. So that and, like, the first time you take a shower at Philmont are probably the two most satisfying experiences that you can have while you're there. But yeah, as far as, like, what I learned from being a crew leader is that, like, different people handle different styles of leadership in very different ways. So my first time as crew leader, I was a completely different leader than I was my second time, because, like, my first time, there were a lot of people who were kind of, they just needed to be individually handled a little bit
younger
more.
Group too, right?
It was a little bit, yeah, it was a younger group, so they kind of needed a little bit of individual, like, motivation, individual attention, and so I definitely had to, like, kind of pull them aside every so often and be like, hey, how's it going? What's bothering you? Are you doing all right? But my second time around, everybody was a little bit older, and so they could just kind of handle the responsibilities that I gave them, and I didn't really have to be a super hands-on leader. I could just kind of lead more by example. So I would definitely say, like, find the different leadership style that works with the group that you're with, and you'll do better than just trying to make them conform to your leadership style.
Good. Mike, what do you think?
So, favorite story, and what was the second part?
Just what you took away from your high adventure experience, what you learned,
Okay.
what you thought the most satisfying. I mean, it's really up to you.
Okay. Well, my favorite story would probably be, I can't remember if it was either, like, the second last or the last day at Northern Tier, and we were canoeing back across the border into America, because you also go up into Canada for some of the treks that you can take, and we were just on this big lake, and just kind of above us and in the distance we saw a bald eagle, and we were like, oh, that's kind of cool, there's a bald eagle. And then it swoops down into the lake that we were on and just picks out a fish, just grabs it with its talons, and then just flies back up into the air. And we all thought that was pretty cool, but then another bald eagle comes in and attacks the first bald eagle, and
Had a bit of a dogfight.
it had a bit of a dogfight in the air, and then they started, like, spiraling downwards, and they both just hit the lake, and this was, what, like 100 feet from us?
Yeah, maybe? It was very close.
It was on the same lake that we were on, and I don't know, that was just really cool. Just we got to see two bald eagles fight over a fish, which was really cool. My overall experience, I mean, obviously, in the moment, you're not going to like what you're doing. It's not going to be fun for the most part, but you're going to look back on it and see, oh, that was awesome. Like, everything about that was amazing. I remember at Philmont, we hiked up Mount Baldy, and that was one of the toughest things that I've ever done, but when you get to the top of the mountain, and this also goes for Tooth of Time or anything else like Northern Tier, the big things that you can do, you get to the top or the end of what you're doing and you look back and you say, wow, that was amazing. Or you look off the top of the mountain and you just see the rest of the camp and you just, it's breathtaking. It was definitely worth every minute of hiking or canoeing or whatever you're doing, because the end, like the what's the saying? Whatever. Basically, it was all worth it.
And so there was a payoff. I mean, there's some challenges. I mean, you go through some tough stuff, but it's fun at the end, and you feel like you've got a sense of accomplishment.
Yes, and at the end, you're gonna want to go back. So, even though you're not gonna have fun the whole time, you should cherish it, because you're gonna look back and say, "Wow, I wish I had done this or gotten more out of this." So yeah.
Great. So I'll just close by saying that from an adult's perspective and being involved in a few of these events, the thing that I liked the most was, I saw the teams, I would see the youth and the leadership start out at the beginning. Everyone's really excited and happy to be there, and there's a lot of enthusiasm, and then, there inevitably are a few challenges along the way, and there's some tougher times. But by the end of the track, and by really by the time that the leaders are working well and the track members are working well and everything's clicking. I mean, it's so nice to see such a well-oiled team at the end, and I really felt like that the boys come back after having done that and been self-sufficient and been literally out in the wilderness for the better part of 2 weeks. That it really changes their perspective and changes their perspective on what they can accomplish and their perspective on what it's like to be challenged and what it's like to be self-sufficient and to make those things happen. So I really feel like it's an amazing experience from an adult standpoint. It's also physically challenging, but also very, very rewarding. I mean, it's the natural beauty is amazing, and the camaraderie built, amongst the scout crew is really hard to beat. So I know you guys are going to have a great time. We're really looking forward to seeing the pictures and hearing about it when you get back. Good luck with your crew elections, and we can't wait to talk to you about it.